So for today's activity, we made cubes to demonstrate different cells to show that cells are most efficient when they are small. You should have made, let's first go over the cubes we made. On your cube, so you should have some cubes in front of you at your table that different people made. You have a cube that's 1 by 1. Now on this cube, what does the paper represent? What part of the cell does the paper represent? That's the cell or the cell membrane, right? So the paper is the cell membrane, and the volume or the space in the middle would be the stuff, the organelles, the cytoplasm, everything on the inside. So we said earlier, a few minutes ago, that cells are most efficient when they're small because things can diffuse in and out much more easily, right? So a small cell, in a given amount of time, the oxygen and carbon dioxide and water can easily get through all of the cytoplasm, whereas a giant cell is going to have a harder problem doing that exact same thing with passive transport. So with our cell models, what we did just now is just make a mathematical model to prove this. So your first cube, the teeny tiny little cube, was 1 by 1, right? So, and we're just going to call it 1 square by 1 square. It wasn't really 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter, but 1 by 1. So the length of one side of this square was 1. The area of one side, length times width, would be 1 times 1 is 1. The surface area is 6. 1 times 1 times 1 times 1. Now, if your math is already going, wait a minute, if you unfold that square, you could see that there's 6 squares, right? The surface area is 6 if you unfolded it, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so then kind of the important thing here is the ratio of surface area to volume. Now here's how I like to think about this. There are 6 squares of paper for every 1 cube of volume. So to think of it as the cell membrane kind of taking care of what's inside. So what if you said that's like having 6 people cleaning 1 house? Is the house going to be clean? Plenty of groceries. Everyone's well, these people are working hard. So 6 people taking care of 1 house. Is that going to work out well? Awesome. No problem. So then let's go to the next square. Oh, and then this last one, the distance from the side to the center. That's kind of like a radius, basically. So how far would the stuff have to diffuse? Half. Okay, so let's do the next square. Slightly trickier, a 2 by 2 square, right? So each side looks like this. What's the length of one side? 2. What is the area? 2 times 2? 4. So each side has 4 units. The surface area, one side, so there's 6 sides, is 24. And the volume is 8. 2 times 2 times 2. The ratio is 24 to 8. There are 24 squares of paper for every 8. So we can simplify that, right? 8 goes into 24 3 times. 8 goes into 8 once. So this is 3 to 1. Kind of makes sense? But the point is mathematically, then you can say, now we have 1 house. We have 3 people taking care of 1 house. Is the house still going to be clean? Everyone's still going to have groceries? Yeah. Sure. The garbage getting taken out? Yeah. Is it as happy and clean as the 6 to 1 house? It could be. If everyone works equally hard, not quite, right? So now let's go up to the 3 by 3. Putting in those numbers. And again, if the math works for you, that's great. And if the math is confusing, the point is that, so we got 3 by 3 on the side. So each side has 9 squares. There's 6 sides, so 9 times 6 is 54. 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. And if you look at that, 2 to 1. So what does that mean? Now we have 2 people taking care of 1 house. Only 2 people to do all the cleaning and vacuuming and get the groceries and take out the garbage. Is the house going to be dirty sometimes? You sometimes running out of groceries? Somebody forgot to take out the garbage? It's a little tougher, right? Then we get an even bigger cell. And when we look at this one, it's a 3-to-2 ratio, or a 1.5 to 1. Now we have 1.5 people taking care of one house. What if we make a huge cell that's 10 by 10? Well, that was 8. 10 by 10 is even better. So if you make, who did 10 by 10? What numbers did you get for the 10 by 10? Yeah, so here, 10 by 10 is nicer numbers. So we'll do 10. Okay. Okay. 10 times 10 times 10. 1,000 or 10? 10 times 10 is 100 times 10. 1,000. 1,000. Right? Because it's side times side times side. 10 times 10 is 100 times 10 is 1,000. Right, guys? Am I missing something? Okay. So then the surface area to volume is going to be 6 to 10, and we can simplify that as 3 to 5. So think of 3 people taking care of 5 houses, right? Or we could make it in a 1 to, but using whole numbers. So you can see as that cell gets really big, it's almost impossible to get enough oxygen and food in and carbon dioxide out. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah? So that's the main idea here. And hopefully by making the cubes, you can kind of physically look at those cubes. And just by looking at the cube models we have here, you can look and see with a really large cube just how far it is to get to the center. And the experiment we did yesterday, where we talked about, or where we, 2 days ago, when we did the iodine diffusing through the plastic baggie, if you had that whole plastic baggie filled with cornstarch and water, it would take a really long time for the iodine to get all the way in. So let's just take a quick look at these questions. And I know there was one about a movie that we didn't watch, but so what patterns do you see as the cube gets bigger? What happens as the cube gets bigger? What happens to the ratio? Yes. Okay. So you could actually mathematically say how much, but what's going to happen is the volume is getting bigger faster than the cell membrane. So basically, or you could even say as it gets bigger, there's not enough cell membrane to take care of the volume or something like that. How do these cube models show that a big cell is not as efficient? Somebody get that question? Why is the big cell not as efficient? And that's just what we talked about, right? Yeah.
Well, because they have less people taking care of.
Yeah, less people taking care of the house, less cell membrane to take care of the cell. Or also, it's farther for the waste to get out and the supplies to get in. So less cell membrane per volume, per cytoplasm. Okay? And now this, so there's a video we didn't watch because we ran out of time with other things, but there's a type of a living thing called a slime mold. And they can actually be really big, like almost the size of the surface of your table, and only be one cell. So how does it do that? Think about our cell in this picture over here. How could you get food and supplies and waste out of this cell? How could you make it so it doesn't have as far to diffuse in? Yeah. If it's skinny, if it's squished. So imagine having, instead of like a balloon, having that balloon flat. And so, yeah, deflated. Exactly. So the two things that happen with the slime mold, so instead of being round like this, like a basketball, it's kind of flat like this. So stuff can kind of diffuse in and out and get all the way in and out, right? And the other thing that happens is it has these kind of like currents. So there's almost like rivers in the cytoplasm. In one of the other classes, one of the students was like, well, couldn't a cell just evolve to have special adaptations to be big? Well, it turns out they can, but in most living things, cells are small. And this thing about cell size, that's why whether you're a person or an elephant, your cells are all about the same size. So you can just say, oh, yep, so flat shape. So for that same surface area, you actually have less volume. All right, what advantages, and then these last two questions are not really directly related to our model, but what advantages might there be to being a single-celled organism? Why might it be useful to be single-celled? Think about those little things living in the pond. Anything useful about being single-celled? Yeah. Okay, good. So you're small, so you should be able to get resources more easily. What else? Okay, so obviously for getting things to and from all the cells. So single-celled, um, pretty simple lifestyle, right? But then what about being so simple, don't need much food, water, or space to live in? What advantage are there to being multicelled? We're multicellular. I wouldn't want to be a single cell. Why is it nice to be multicellular? Somebody different? Yes. You won't get squashed. Yes. If you damage one cell, you'll still be alive. And are all of your cells exactly the same? What were you going to say? Yeah, because we have different cells that do different jobs, we can have muscles and a brain. And a brain is made of nerve cells, which is different than the muscle cells and different than the skin cells. And so different cells do different jobs. So you can be very big. You can have different organs doing different things and live longer. A single-celled organism isn't going to live very long, right? It's got a much shorter life cycle. Okay, so those are all the things there. And then just real quickly, since we're recording this lesson, I wanted to jump back to the words we talked about earlier this week, which were these words. You should have these written down. We did these on Monday, and we've talked about them all week. So just real quickly, so it'll be in the flipped lesson. And we've watched 2 Tim and Mobies. So diffusion, particles moving from an area of greater concentration to an area of lesser concentration until it evens out. And this is the main way that substances get in and out of cells. Osmosis is the diffusion of water through a selectively permeable membrane or through the cell membrane. Selectively permeable means it allows some substances to pass through but not others. Passive transport, materials pass through not using the cell's energy, so diffusion or osmosis. Active transport, movement of materials that does require energy. And passive transport can also include, remember we talked about the proteins in the cell membrane that act like a door. On Tim and Moby today, they showed the cell like engulfing something, those types of things. So those are all active transport. And you need those to get bigger molecules, and you need those to transport stuff you need into the cell. So those are the main things. And then surface area and volume, we just talked about that. And why do cells have to be small? Any questions on any of that?